All right, welcome in, everyone. Ready for another deep dive. Today, we're tackling a subject that, even after all these years, still has people asking questions. The assassination of JFK. It's one of those things you've probably heard so much about it, seen the documentaries, read the articles, but it feels like there's always more to uncover.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's such a dense, layered event in history. There's the official story, then all the theories, and honestly, sometimes it feels like the more you learn, the less certain you become.
That's exactly why we're doing this deep dive. Thousands of documents related to the assassination, they were just released, and it's kicked off this whole new wave of analysis. What we're going to try to do, using reports on these documents, mainly from the BBC, is figure out what we should really pay attention to. We'll cut through some of that noise, help you, the listener, figure out what's genuinely important in all of this.
Yeah, because it's easy to get overwhelmed. Information overload, for sure.
Totally. So, looking at these new files, what are some of the things that really jump out at you as crucial?
Well, there's definitely more clarity now about Lee Harvey Oswald, and specifically how much the CIA actually knew about him before the assassination.
Okay, so not just that he was on their radar, but that he was more than just a blip.
Much more. It's becoming clearer that he was someone they were deeply interested in for a long time before 1963.
That's interesting because if you follow this case at all, you've heard that before.
Yeah.
But what's different now? Is it just more confirmation or is there something new here?
It's a bit of both, honestly. We're seeing that a lot of these documents aren't brand new. They've been released before, but they were heavily redacted. What we're getting now are more complete versions, fewer of those blacked out sections.
So more context, more of the full picture.
Exactly. And it's significant. Jefferson Morley, he runs the JFK Facts blog. He called this the most exciting news around JFK records since the 1990s. He even said that some really important documents have finally come into full public view.
Wow, that really emphasizes the potential importance of this release. It makes you wonder what they were hiding.
For sure. And then there's Oswald's trip to Mexico City just a few months before the assassination. Philip Sheenan, he wrote a book about this. He points out that the CIA was definitely watching Oswald while he was there.
I remember reading about that trip. Wasn't there something about him talking about killing Kennedy while he was in Mexico?
Yeah, and these documents seem to support that. There was reason to believe he talked openly about killing Kennedy. And it gets even more intriguing because there's a chance those conversations were overheard by the CIA.
Hold on, so they might have actually heard him discussing plans to kill the president.
Potentially. And that ties into a CIA memo that was actually released earlier, back in '75. But now we're seeing more of it. The BBC reports that this memo kind of downplayed how much the agency knew about what Oswald was doing in Mexico City. Like, they focused on how he made 3 phone calls to the Soviet embassy, but only clearly identified himself in one of them.
So they were aware of him, aware of these calls, but maybe not making a big deal out of it at the time. Makes you think, what else did they know but choose to minimize?
Exactly. And that's what's so crucial about these less redacted documents. It gives us a better picture of what the CIA knew about Oswald before November 1963, even if it's still not the full story.
Right. It definitely paints a picture of Oswald being more connected, more on the intelligence radar than maybe the initial narrative suggested. But okay, let's shift gears a bit. Aside from what we're learning about Oswald, what else do you think is really important for us to understand from these files?
Well, they provide a really fascinating look into how intelligence was gathered during the Cold War. It's like a window into that world of espionage and counterintelligence. And then there's what they reveal about the relationship between Kennedy himself and the CIA.
Okay, tell me more about that. What are we seeing in these documents about that dynamic?
There's this newly unredacted memo written by Arthur Schlesinger, one of Kennedy's aides. It's pretty critical of the CIA. He was concerned about their influence on foreign policy, specifically how they had such a large presence in U.S. embassies, even in allied countries like France. He warned Kennedy about it, suggesting that the CIA was maybe a little too powerful, too involved in shaping foreign policy decisions.
So even before the assassination, there was some tension there, maybe even some distrust between Kennedy and the intelligence community.
It definitely seems that way. And David Barrett, a professor at Villanova University, he pointed out that releasing these documents is important for government transparency. He says that intelligence agencies naturally want to keep things like operational details and budgets under wraps.
Yeah, you can see why they'd want to keep something secret. But at the same time, when it's an event as big as the JFK assassination, the public has a right to know what really happened.
Exactly. It's this constant balancing act, right? Secrecy versus the public's need to know. And these documents, even with the redactions, they're helping to tip the scales a bit.
Now, I know the BBC report mentions some specific intelligence techniques they found in the files. Can you tell us more about those? What kind of stuff are we talking about?
Oh, it's pretty fascinating. One document talked about this thing called fluoroscopic scanning, which basically uses X-rays to find hidden microphones in CIA offices.
Wait, they're using X-rays to search for bugs.
Yep, shows you how paranoid they were about espionage, even within their own ranks. It's like something out of a spy movie, trying to stay one step ahead of potential leaks and surveillance.
It's kind of wild to think about. And what else? Was there anything else about these techniques that stood out?
Oh yeah, another document described how they used this special paint, visible only under ultraviolet light, to secretly tag and identify phone booths that were tapped. Clever, huh?
Sneaky, for sure, but also kind of creepy, you know? Like, how much were they listening in on? Makes you think about the whole issue of privacy, even back then. And there was something about a connection to Watergate, wasn't there?
Ah, you've got a good memory. Yeah, this document that mentioned that ultraviolet paint thing, it also mentioned James McCord.
Wait, McCord? Wasn't he one of the guys involved in the Watergate break-in?
The very same. It's a weird indirect link, right? You've got these Cold War era intelligence methods, and then years later they pop up in this major political scandal.
Yeah.
Makes you think about how history kind of folds in on itself sometimes.
It really does. Okay, so we've got new details about Oswald, insights into how the CIA operated, even a tie-in to Watergate. What about conspiracy theories? I mean, every time new JFK files are released, the internet goes a little crazy. What kind of buzz did these documents create?
Oh, you know how it goes. Lots of claims flying around online saying these files were full of bombshells, new evidence of conspiracies and all that. But here's the thing. A lot of those supposed new details, they've actually been out there for a while.
So more like old news getting repackaged as something new and exciting.
Pretty much. The BBC report highlighted one specific example, a guy named Gary Underhill. He was a military intelligence agent during World War II.
Okay, and what's the story with him? Why is he relevant to this files?
Well, Underhill claimed there was this secret group within the CIA, and they were the ones who really orchestrated the Kennedy assassination. This theory was actually published way back in 1967 in this magazine called Ramparts, which was known for being, a bit left-leaning at the time. There was also controversy surrounding Underhill's death in 1964, which was officially ruled as suicide, but Ramparts questioned that conclusion.
So with these new files, were there any new revelations about Underhill or his claims?
There were these photos going around online, a 7-page memo about Underhill. It looked pretty intriguing. But here's the catch. Most of that memo wasn't new at all. The CIA memo that mentions Underhill, it was first released back in 2017. In this latest batch, they only unredacted a few sentences on one page.
So not exactly a smoking gun then.
Nope. More like a rehash of an old theory. And even that theory, it's based on a secondhand account that was published after Underhill died. There's no real hard evidence to back it up. The BBC used this as an example of how these releases can lead to unsubstantiated theories popping up, grabbing attention, but not actually offering anything new or credible. It's hard to separate fact from fiction sometimes.
For sure. Okay, so even with these releases, it seems like a lot of the bigger questions about the assassination are still unanswered. Now, were these documents completely unredacted? Did we get to see everything this time around?
That's a million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
There was this law passed in 1992. It said all documents related to the assassination had to be released within 25 years. But there was a catch they built in exceptions for national security.
Ah, so even with a law, there's still wiggle room.
Exactly. And that's why we've seen these rolling releases over the years with redactions still in place. Both President Trump and President Biden, they both released more documents trying to be more transparent.
Trump even said he wanted to declassify everything, release it all without redactions.
He did. But even with that intention, these newly released documents still have some redactions. We're still not getting the full, unfiltered story.
It's frustrating, Like, we're getting closer, but it feels like there still is veil over certain things.
I get it. It's definitely a slow process. However, most experts, like Jefferson Morley, they agree that this latest release is still a step forward in terms of transparency, even with those redactions.
Okay, so some progress, even if it's incremental. And it sounds like there might be even more out there, right? Morley mentioned documents still held in the National Archives and potentially with the CIA and FBI.
Yeah, he did. It seems like this process of uncovering the truth, it's ongoing. It's not just about these releases, it's about what might still be hidden away.
The BBC even mentioned potential future releases related to the assassinations of Robert F. Kennedy Sr. and Martin Luther King Jr. That just shows how deep this goes.
It really does. It's a reminder that these events, they still hold a powerful grip on our collective consciousness. But, as David Barrett, that historian we mentioned earlier, he pointed out, assassinations, they tend to attract all sorts of theories and speculation. And he believes that no matter how many documents are released, those theories, those questions, they're probably never going to fully disappear.
It's the nature of the mystery, right?
Hmm.
The unknown always fuels speculation. So for you, the listener, let's wrap up our deep dive into these JFK files. We've learned more about the CIA's interest in Oswald before the assassination. We've gotten a glimpse into Cold War intelligence techniques and a better understanding of the complex relationship between Kennedy and the CIA. We've also seen how old conspiracy theories can resurface, like the one involving Gary Underhill, without any new evidence to back them up. And finally, we've learned that this process of document release, it's still ongoing. There's more to come, more pieces to the puzzle, but also more questions to be answered.
Great summary. And I think it's important to remember that while we've gained some valuable insights, these documents don't give us all the answers. The JFK assassination, it's still a mystery in many ways.
And that brings us to our final thought for today. Think about the balance between the public's right to know and national security concerns. How do those two things, the need for transparency and the need for secrecy, how do they shape our understanding of history? And how do they influence our trust in the information we're given? It's something to consider, especially when we're dealing with events as significant and as shrouded in mystery as the assassination of JFK. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
And to everyone listening, until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.